quality, even with the Vice Chair, who is also a member of the Budget Committee, Honorable Dr. Makari Muru. Honorable Speaker, I'll be direct to the point because I want to highlight a few things. When we came in as Kenya Kwanza, Honorable Speaker, the President was very categorical that Kenya had to reverse the gear in terms of borrowing. And Honorable Speaker, what we are doing in the Budget Committee, alongside the Debt Committee and the Finance Committee, because we work together, is that gradually we have been able to climb down in terms of the deficit. Honorable Speaker, last financial year, Kenya had a deficit to GDP ratio of around 5.7%. Honorable Speaker, that came down around supplementary budget time. At some point we came to 4.4%, and then after the last supplementary, we came to 5.5% debt to GDP ratio. Honorable Speaker, though we'll be debating the BPS tomorrow, what we have managed to do actually for the next financial year is that the deficit has come down to from 886 billion, and we have come down to around 703.9 billion shillings, which is just around 3.9% deficit to GDP ratio, and which is a very good path, Honorable Speaker, when it comes to managing our appetite to borrow. Honorable Speaker, number two, I also want to just bring the point there, because sometimes we read even on the newspapers on the amount of money that has been borrowed. Honorable Speaker, the truth of the matter is that Kenya never borrows monies outside of the budgeted deficit. Honorable Speaker, when we have seen an escalation of the debt portfolio, that has majorly been because our debt, which is roughly 11 trillion, 50% is debt domestic, and the other 50% thereabout, give or take, is also foreign. 70% of our foreign debt is dollar denominated. And therefore, Honorable Speaker, what happens when the shilling has lost, let's say 20%, then you just take the 20% and roll over to our debt portfolio, which is foreign, and therefore we may see the debt increasing, for example, by 1 trillion without borrowing a shilling, because our debt figures are given in shillings, but 50% of the debt is borrowed in external currencies. Honorable Speaker, we have also seen that whereas Kenya is adopting a conservative manner and a conservative model of borrowing rates, we have also seen some of the major economies over borrowing, Honorable Speaker. Currently, the debt in the US is over 120% debt to GDP ratio of over 34 trillion shillings, which has actually also caused a standoff in the Congress in the US. Honorable Speaker, even in the UK, the debt to GDP ratio is over 100%. But what we are saying is that we cannot compare our economy to those of the developed economies, Honorable Speaker, because our cost is different, our use is different, and that is why we will continue to borrow less, and because we cannot afford to continue digging the hole of debt. Honorable Speaker, when we talk about debt also, we look at several things. For example, when you go to Japan, Japan has a debt to GDP ratio which is highest in the world of over 250%. But Honorable Speaker, you have to look at the cost. The cost in Kenya now to borrow domestically, just recently we had an infrastructure board of over 17%, Honorable Speaker, which is tax-free. At some point in Japan, for the last 10 years, they have had boards which yield negative, which actually have negative yield, meaning the negative interest rate. And therefore, Honorable Speaker, the more the reason we cannot compare ourselves with those. And Honorable Speaker, because of such kind of blunders, Honorable Speaker, we have been able to see, after our borrowing in Japan, this has led to deflation, and that deflation, Honorable Speaker, has led to the real GDP in Japan has remained the same for the last 30 years, Honorable Speaker, because of our borrowing and also the ramifications of our borrowing. Honorable Speaker, also, Kenya is a gross borrower and therefore does not lend to anyone. Some of these big economies, Honorable Speaker, what is reported as gross borrowing, Honorable Speaker, but they also...
The Honorable Jerry Minor, member for Kirinyaga. Oh, but hold on a moment, let me